how do you know when something is inherently great? Maybe you just feel it, like when you see a rainbow or hear your favorite song that brings back a flood of happy memories. For me, firing up WipEout on the PlayStation for the very first time is a perfect example of that feeling. But of course, being great doesn't automatically make something the best. So today, I'm diving into this retro gaming boss review to see if WipEout really is the best racing game on the original PlayStation. Released in 1995 by Psygnosis, WipEout was a revolutionary racing game that immediately captured the attention of gamers. Building on the superb foundation that was laid by F-Zero on the Super Nintendo, it took anti-gravity racing to new heights with its futuristic sci-fi twist. Unlike the more conventional racers of the time like Gran Turismo and Ridge Racer, WipEout combines sleek racing hovercrafts with tight, fast-paced racing and combat over some insane tracks. The game's stunning visuals, coupled with its brilliant techno soundtrack, made it a visual and auditory feast that set it apart from anything else on the market. Before we dive deeper into WipEout, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot and helps keep the retro gaming content coming your way. Now, back to the game. At the time of its release, the racing genre was dominated by more traditional titles such as Super Mario Kart and Daytona USA. These games leaned on simple, arcade-style racing. And to be honest, I first played WipEout on the Sega Saturn, and while that was very good, the frame rate and visual fidelity didn't quite match up to the smoother animation and more visually impressive PlayStation version. I always thought the hovercrafts in WipEout really stood out and looked like some sort of combination of high-performance fighter jets and a drag racer. The way this game portrayed the anti-gravity mechanic was more than just a gimmick. It added a level of skill and precision that you had to master to manage the sharp turns, steep inclines, and jumps while managing your speed. The way that WipEout simulated the physics and feeling of the craft's weight and momentum, along with the sensation of bobbing up and down while being suspended above the tracks, is pretty remarkable, even to this day. The dual analog sticks on the PlayStation controller made the sensitivity and responsiveness of the controls feel so believable and just right. In fact, when I was recently replaying it, I laughed to myself when I thought about how the gameplay feels like barreling down a water slide with your hair on fire while tripping out at a techno rave. Not that I would know. Anyway, the gameplay was an adrenaline rush, and the blend of racing action was taken to the next level with power-ups like missiles, shields, and mines, which added a whole new layer of strategy. There's nothing quite like the thrill of lining up the perfect missile shot or laying down a string of mines across a choke point on the track. The tension of sometimes narrowly winning or losing a race by the smallest margin made WipEout endlessly challenging and replayable. In comparison, while Gran Turismo was a masterclass in car simulation and Ridge Racer offered traditional arcade thrills, WipEout was a completely different experience, offering a high-tech rush that was unmatched by the competition. Now here's a fun story from back in 1996. I had the good fortune to attend the E3 Gaming Expo in Los Angeles, where one of the vendors was showing off their early VR-like headsets. They demoed WipEout using their funky contraption, and let me tell you, it was an experience unlike anything I'd ever had before. The image on screen was like having a massive 80-inch monitor floating in front of my eyes that provided panoramic visuals of the racing. The pounding techno soundtrack came through crystal clear on the stereo headphones, which literally sent the shiver down my spine. It all came together just right and somehow made me almost believe for a brief moment that I was actually piloting one of those racers through the circuits in real life. That experience was so immersive and left a lasting impression on me that I truly wish every fan of this game could have tried out back in the day. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this video, I put a link in the description below of a playlist of all of my other content that you might also enjoy, so check it out and stick around for a while. WipEout's visual style was groundbreaking, with its cyberpunk-inspired design motif that just screamed future tech. Even the game's interface embraced a high-tech aesthetic, from the ultra-modern fonts that were used to the minimalist menu layout. It was clear that Psygnosis put an incredible effort into the game's art direction, and the overall graphic design was one of the reasons why WipEout felt so ahead of its time. An obvious technical achievement of this game was its impressive racing environments. WipEout used intricate 3D models for its complex tracks, creating courses filled with detail and depth. Back when this game was developed, the most cutting-edge software at the time, called Softimage, was used to visualize the roller coaster-like tracks. Despite the power of the PlayStation at the time, draw distances were still limited, so the developers were able to cleverly hide most of the background popping caused by longer stretches of the track by designing them to be constantly swerving and adding massive jumps and steep inclines and declines. Each track was so creative and unique that sometimes after a race, I would just sit there and watch the view of my ship speeding around the course, which I thought looked so damn cool. My personal favorite part of the game was its incredible techno soundtrack, featuring electronic music from iconic mid-90s groups like Cold Storage, The Chemical Brothers, and Orbital. This wasn't just background music, it was a core part of the WipEout experience. The driving beats matched the high-speed gameplay, helping to immerse players in the game world. WipEout soundtrack became as popular as the game itself, with it later being one of the first games to release its soundtrack as a standalone audio CD. Remember those? The influence of the game's music is still felt today, since it helped to popularize the use of licensed songs in video games. The impact and legacy of WipEout on the PlayStation and the racing genre as a whole is undeniable. It wasn't just a game, it was a cultural touchstone for the 90s generation, combining the love of cutting-edge sci-fi, electronic music, and a period of rapidly advancing technology of all kinds. The success of the game naturally led to sequels like WipEout 2097 and WipEout 3, which refined the formula with improved visuals, tighter controls, and expanded soundtracks. The series continued its legacy through later PlayStation consoles, with WipEout HD and WipEout Omega Collection bringing the franchise into the high-definition era. Even the original PlayStation Portable got into the action, and I remember playing WipEout Pure in the Zone mode on my PSP while riding the subway into work, and was so enthralled by it that I sometimes missed my stop more than a couple times. Oh well, totally worth it. Just don't tell my boss why I was really late to work those days. As for the 2025 fan-made homebrew release that was recently put out for the Sega Dreamcast, that's just another testament to the lasting legacy of WipEout and the amazing community that keeps these classics alive. It feels amazing seeing the lasting popularity of this game today and recalling how it felt playing it back in 1995 for the first time. So going back to our central question of whether WipEout is truly the superior racing game on the PlayStation. In summary, what made it the best on the console was its innovative design, gameplay advancements, music, and a pretty flawless overall execution. These factors combined in a way that brought it up to a level that other racing titles just couldn't match. In contrast to the other excellent racing games on the platform, such as Gran Turismo and Ridge Racer, WipEout was unapologetically stylish and advanced in its presentation, with its ultra-modern vibe from start to finish. The overall presentation was so far ahead of its time that it had an irresistible appeal to players who were looking for something beyond normal racing games. Anyone who's played this classic knows that it's all about how WipEout so easily pulls you into the zone, immersing you into a new world where speed and adrenaline take center stage. But that's just what I think. Is WipEout really the best racing game on the PlayStation? Or do you think Gran Turismo or Ridge Racer are better? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear why. And before I go, don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. And if you're new here, welcome to the channel. Be sure to subscribe for more retro gaming goodness. Alright my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out, reminding you to keep your games old school and keep flying forward. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Remember the PSP? What if I told you that one of its 20-year-old games actually perfected racing on the go? A game that even today feels fast, stylish, and downright timeless. I'm talking about WipEout PURE, a futuristic masterpiece that didn't just set the tone for the PSP's early years, but became the gold standard for what handheld racing games could be. So buckle up, or better yet, strap yourself into the anti-gravity cockpit, and be sure to watch until the end to experience what it's really like in the game's infamous Zone mode relentlessly hurtling forward through constant acceleration into untold dimensions of intensity and speed. But more on that in a bit. Join me to jump into the game that brought pure speed and pure style into the palms of your hands. This is WipEout PURE. First things first, put away your overpriced Nintendo Switch 2 or your fancy pants Steam Deck. Because when the PSP first launched in 2005, it was a hardcore flex by Sony. Handheld gaming had long been Nintendo's turf, but Sony came out swinging with a system that basically said, hey, you like your Game Boy? Isn't that fancy? Now watch us put a PlayStation 2 in the palm of your hand. And for a time, that's exactly what it felt like. The PSP wasn't just a toy, it was sleek, multimedia ready, and packed with technical prowess that handhelds had never seen. This thing could play hundreds of different full-length movies on Sony's proprietary UMD's media format. You know, those unique little mini-me DVDs in a round plastic shell. Oh, so cute. It also featured MP3 music playback capability and even had online web browsing. It was more like a Swiss Army knife of entertainment, and it offered all of this a full 2 years before Apple released their first iPhone. Wow. But what really made people sit up and pay attention was the idea of console-quality gaming on the go. No more watered-down spin-offs. No more good-for-handheld excuses. Sony promised the real deal, and in its launch lineup, one game stood out as the perfect showcase for what the PSP was all about: WipEout PURE. The sixth installment of the WipEout series, following WipEout Fusion in 2002, the game takes place in the year 2197, exactly 100 years after the events of WipEout 2097, and revolves around players competing in the FX300 Anti-Gravity Racing League. The WipEout series had already made its mark on the PlayStation and PlayStation 2. It was fast, futuristic, and stylish, a racing game that had as much personality as it had raw speed. But by the time WipEout Fusion hit the PS2, the series had drifted a little. It experimented with upgrades, heavier combat mechanics, and design changes that, while fun, felt like it was losing touch with what made WipEout truly unique. Fans wanted the purity back, the razor-sharp focus of momentum and precision. And when Studio Liverpool got the chance to make a flagship racing game for Sony's shiny new PSP, they delivered exactly that. They stripped WipEout back to its essence, polished it up, and in doing so, gave the handheld its defining racing experience. WipEout PURE is exactly what the title suggests. Pure speed, pure style, pure WipEout. The first thing that hits you is its look. For a handheld game released in 2005, this thing looked impossibly good. Sleek, futuristic tracks twisting through industrial skylines, neon lights flashing across your visor, and anti-gravity ships that looked like concept art brought to life. It wasn't just about racing, it was about transporting you to a world where speed is beauty. The developers even brought back the Designers Republic, the legendary graphic design studio responsible for WipEout's iconic branding. Their return gave the game that unmistakable futuristic identity, bold colors, minimalistic fonts, and visual cues that made it feel like you were racing inside of an art installation that also happened to be trying to kill you at 700 kilometers per hour. This game even includes an online multiplayer mode and was the first PSP title with downloadable content featuring new ships, tracks, and music. And oh, the speed. If you've never played WipEout PURE, let me try and describe it. Imagine sitting on a roller coaster, but instead of being strapped into the cart, you're balancing on top of it, standing on a dinner plate covered in butter. Now, give that roller coaster a few sharp turns, sprinkle in some laser fire, and crank the soundtrack up to 11. That's WipEout PURE. It wasn't just fast for the PSP, it was fast, period. The handheld's crisp screen made every race feel blistering, and yet the controls were tight enough to keep you from flying off in frustration. This wasn't just an arcade racing chaos. It was a perfectly tuned digital dance of precision. The soundtrack was the perfect partner to that dance. WipEout has always had a reputation for killer music, and PURE kept the tradition alive. It packed a lineup of electronic artists that perfectly matched the futuristic aesthetic. Pulsating beats, hypnotic rhythms, and tracks that made you feel like you weren't just racing, you were living inside the music. The audio design wasn't limited to the soundtrack either. Weapons had crunch, engines roared with a futuristic hum, and the announcer's crisp delivery made every power-up feel like a moment of drama. But here's the thing, WipEout Pure wasn't just about holding down the accelerator and hoping for the best. Oh no. This game had layers. Precision and strategy were baked into its DNA. If you've ever played WipEout, you know about air braking, the subtle art of tapping the shoulder buttons to carve through corners instead of plowing into a wall like a futuristic bumper car. Pure refined that mechanic to perfection. Then it added the brilliant new gameplay mechanic of the barrel roll boost. Sacrifice a chunk of your ship's energy, execute a roll mid-air, and land with a burst of speed. High risk, high reward. Combine that with a new side slip maneuver, double tapping the air brake to slide your ship just enough to nail those tight corners. And suddenly every track became a playground to show off your skill. You weren't just racing, you were performing. And of course the weapons added another layer of strategy. Mines, missiles, quakes. They could all turn the tide of a race, but unlike Mario Kart's cheerful chaos, WipEout's weapons hit like a sledgehammer. A well-placed rocket could slam your craft into a wall and steal precious seconds off your momentum. It could be frustrating, sure, but it also forced you to think on your feet. Do you use up that missile, or do you absorb it to restore your shields? Do you risk going wide to snag a power-up, or play it safe, keeping your racing line clean? Every choice mattered, and when you nailed a perfect lap, dodging attacks, hitting every boost pad, and carving through corners, it felt less like winning a race and more like mastering a symphony. So why does WipEout Pure still resonate today? Why in 2025 are people still talking about it? Still dusting off their PSPs or firing it up on emulators? Part of it's nostalgia, sure, but part of it is that WipEout Pure nailed something timeless. It found that sweet spot between old school challenge and modern smoothness. Compared to its siblings, it struck the balance just right. More refined than early WipEouts, less bloated than WipEout Fusion, and more accessible than the punishing difficulty of some of the later entries in the franchise. It became the last great evolution of WipEout's momentum-based racing before the series shifted gears again. In its era, Pure stood tall against rivals too. Nintendo had F-Zero, sure, but that series was already fading into history by the mid-2000s. On consoles, racers like Burnout and Need for Speed were making waves, but none of them captured the futuristic thrill that WipEout delivered. Pure gave handheld gamers something unique, an experience that wasn't a compromise, but a full realization of what the PSP was capable of. And that's why it endures. It wasn't just a game, it was a proof of concept. The PSP could deliver the future. So what about revisiting WipEout Pure today? If you've still got a PSP, you're in for a treat. The game still looks and plays great on the original hardware, and with a few tweaks, like boosting the CPU clock speed, you can even squeeze out smoother performance. If you don't have the original UMD anymore, emulation is always an option, and honestly, seeing WipEout Pure running at higher resolutions on modern screens just reinforces how forward-thinking its design was. The purity still shines through.
Initiating Marvel.
Okay, if you're up for a challenge, here's something you've got to try, and my personal favorite part of the game. Zone Mode. This gameplay mode is so simple and just addictive. The goal here couldn't be more straightforward. Jump into your racer and see how long you can survive under the relentless pressure of an ever-increasing velocity. The speed ramps up until your reflexes can't keep up, and trust me, you'll be sweating by the end. Share your best zone scores with the community. You might be surprised how many people are still chasing those high numbers 2 decades later. But to show you how it really feels to experience how WipEout Pure Zone Mode can be, I present to you the 3 levels of Zone Mode Enlightenment. As you begin at the noob level, your craft begins to move along with an easygoing and smooth pace. It's like taking a leisurely Sunday drive across town with the window rolled down, enjoying the breeze and the relaxing pace. As you take in the sights of the abstract geometric art throughout the track, you notice the intricacies of their design and start to develop a feel for the layout of the circuit ahead. You hear the robo-announcer call out Zone 5 as you glide around the track, as the action starts to speed up a bit, and you find yourself vibing to the pulse of the electronic beats that are powering you forward. And then, before you know it, you hear the announcer call out Zone 15
Zone 15.
as you enter the pro level. Your subconscious asks internally, what the hell just happened? You're now hurtling forward at an ever-increasing pace, rocketing ahead on a cushion of air as you scream around the corners, tapping your air brakes at exactly the right moment to perfectly arc through the apex of the turn. Your hands begin sweating a bit as you grasp the controller a bit harder, leaning in toward the screen to see the upcoming corners more clearly. Your focus is pure as the rising hum of the ship's engine sound, and as Zone 20 is called out, you're feeling powerful, with razor reflexes dialed in as you complete lap after lap. It's a meditative state that feels so natural and good, but that voice pops up in your head again, wondering how long you can last as things continue speeding up endlessly. You feel an icy chill run down your back as the announcer calls out Zone 30 as you rip through the boundaries of space-time into some kind of warped, fifth dimension of speed. You've now entered the final elite level, where the normal passage of time is distorted into some kind of relativistic movement through the ether. You're not even conscious of your hands on the controller anymore, and your eyes could be closed for all you know. Your mind has somehow detached from your body, as the course seems to be morphing around your ship, while you're holding your breath and sweating profusely. Every turn seems to be happening on its own, almost like you're watching a movie play out. As Zone 40 is called out, all you can see anymore is a non-stop blur of motion and light. And just then, your dog barks at something outside, distracting you for just an instant. Your conscious mind snaps back into your skull while you're burning up the track. Panic comes crashing down as you're thinking about the controls and mentally timing your turns. It doesn't work. You overcompensate, entering the corner too soon, ramming back into the opposite side wall as you feel the sharp needles of losing control. That beeping energy meter's drilling into your mind as you push harder, trying to recover, and then you sigh as you let go, seeing your ship wink out of existence as it disintegrates into fiery pixels. My friends, this incredible feeling of just barely hanging on to control at beyond the very edge of your capability, and being able to do it at progressively higher zones, is one of the most pure gaming experiences out there, and is something for every gamer's bucket list. I remember being totally engrossed in the moment, in a state of total flow, powering through zone after zone of increasing speed. And even on my very best runs, I was only able to get up to zone 45 or maybe 50 once. Which makes it even more incredible when I now see people online running through zones with ease, getting up into the 80s and 90s. Jeez. In the end, WipEout Pure lives up to its name. It's pure in design, pure in execution, and pure in the way it captured the PSP's promise of console-quality gaming in your pocket. It wasn't weighed down by unnecessary gimmicks or overcomplicated systems. It was focused, polished, and so damn stylish. And that purity is why it remains not just one of the best PSP games, but one of the greatest handheld racing games of all time. So next time you pick up a PSP, or even just think back about it, remember that there was a game that defined what portable gaming could be. A game that turned your downtime during commutes, study breaks, and late-night play sessions into heart-pounding, futuristic races. WipEout Pure wasn't just about speed, it was about vision. And in that sense, it remains one of my all-time favorite retro games on any console. Alright, my friends, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
You know that feeling, right? It's the end of a long day, your brain is buzzing from a dozen different problems, and you find your mind drifting back. Not just to a game, but to a specific feeling. For me, the sleek, futuristic chime of the PSP startup is the portal back, and specifically, the intro music to the still phenomenal WipEout Pulse. This takes us back to 2007. The iPhone was just announced and the world was changing. But in our hands, we held a slice of a different future, one made of anti-gravity racing, impossible tracks, and an electronic pulse that kicked. But for those of us who cut our teeth on the original PlayStation, seeing a WipEout game this polished and this complete on a handheld felt like a miracle. It wasn't just a portable game, it was a statement. But here we are, 18 years later. In an age of 4K, 120 FPS racers, does Pulse still hold up? Or is its memory better than the reality? Today, we're not just doing a review, we're conducting a retrospective to take a closer look. I'm going to argue that WipEout Pulse isn't only a great PSP game, it represents the absolute zenith of the series, a perfect, unrepeatable fusion of technical prowess and artistic ambition that later, more powerful consoles couldn't quite recapture.
3, 2, 1, go!
Let's start with the core of any great racer, the feel, the physics, and this is where Pulse makes its first and strongest claim for the throne. If you go back to the original WipEout on PS1, it was brutal. Hitting a wall wasn't a mistake, it was a race-ending catastrophe. You'd immediately scrub all of your speed, and it felt punishing in a way that could feel unfair. Then you had WipEout Fusion on the PS2, which, love it or hate it, leaned into a more arcadey, almost on-rails feel. It lost some of that tactile connection to the track. WipEout Pulse is in the Goldilocks zone. Studio Liverpool found the perfect balance. The ships have a tangible sense of weight and inertia. You feel the mass shift as you pitch into a turn. You need to anticipate, to start your air brakes early to feather them through the corner. It's challenging, but it's a fair challenge. It respects your skill. And when you nail a perfect lap, it's not by accident. It's because you've learned the language of the track and the ship. It's the game that makes you feel like a genius. And let's talk about the mag strip. On paper, it sounds like a gimmick, right? Something out of F-Zero. But Pulse implements it with a designer's restraint. It's not just for loops. It's used to create gravity-defying track layouts that double back on themselves, sending you hurtling upside down through a cityscape or hanging you precariously over an edge. It expanded the design vocabulary without breaking the fundamental WipEout feel. It still required skill. Hitting a mag strip at the wrong angle could throw off your entire line. This was an innovation in the service of the experience, not just for spectacle's sake. Because what Studio Liverpool pulled off on the PSP's hardware is frankly staggering. The PSP was powerful for its time, but let's be real. It had a 333 MHz CPU that was capped at 222 MHz for licensed software, and a paltry 32 MB of RAM. To get a game like Pulse running at a rock-solid 60 frames per second with detailed tracks, complex ship models, and all of those particle effects required pure coding wizardry. They leveraged the console's custom graphics processors to handle the geometry transformation and lighting, freeing up the main CPU for the game's logic and that all-important physics model. Compare it to its direct competitor at the time, the Nintendo DS. There's no comparison. Pulse was a console-quality experience in your pocket. But even more impressive is comparing it to the PS2 port. That version, outsourced to another studio, ran at a choppy 30 frames per second, had inferior texture work, and was famously buggy. It proves that the original Pulse was masterfully optimized. The developers knew the PSP's architecture inside and out, and they pushed it to its extreme limits. The art direction did the heavy lifting too. The tracks aren't just technically impressive, they're stylistically coherent. They used pre-baked lighting and clever texture work to create a sense of scale and detail that the raw hardware just couldn't render in real time. This is a key point. Pulse's visuals have aged better than many games from its era because its beauty comes from its strong art direction, not just its raw polygon count. The campaign structure, known as the campaign grid, was a massive overhaul from WipEout Pure. 16 grids of events, slowly introducing you to every track through a variety of races, time trials, speed laps, and the brilliant zone mode. Yes, it can feel like it's making you do your homework before the fun part, and for adults with limited time available for gaming, the pacing can drag. But you cannot deny the value. You mastered these tracks inside and out. And the content, 12 tracks, each with a reverse version that often completely changes the feel. 8 teams with different racing crafts, each with unique handling characteristics. Multiple game modes, including the frantic Eliminator. This UMD was packed. But the soul is in the sound. The soundtrack is a perfectly curated time capsule of mid-2000s electronica. It's not just background music, it's the heartbeat of the game, syncing with the high-speed action to create an indescribably good flow state. And that iconic, calm British computer voice, "Warning, missile," is pure audio comfort food for the series veterans. And then there was the killer feature, custom soundtracks. You could load your own MP3s onto a memory stick duo and race to your own personal OST. This wasn't just a bullet point on the box, it was a feature that gave the game a deeply personal, endless replayability. It connected the future in the game to the music of your present. I remember loading my favorite tracks from The Prodigy and reveling in the speed while being propelled forward by those pounding beats. Yeah, 2007 was good. So where does Pulse sit in the WipEout pantheon? I argue it sits at the top. WipEout Pure was a back-to-basics reset. It was brilliant, but it was laying a foundation. Pulse is what they built on that foundation, a stronger, more polished, more complete vision. The games that follow, like the beautiful WipEout HD and Fury on the PS3, are essentially direct evolutions of the Pulse formula, its physics, its track designs, its UI philosophy. And when you play the Omega Collection, remember, you're playing the spiritual successor to WipEout Pulse. But here's the crux of my argument. Pulse might be the zenith because of its constraints. The PSP's limitations forced a focus and purity of design. Later games might have had more power, but did they have more soul? Did they have that perfect intensity? Playing Pulse today, you can't help but feel the what if? What if Studio Liverpool had been given a chance to make one final, definitive WipEout with a modern budget, but with the same design philosophy that made Pulse so special? A 4K, HDR 120 FPS version of this. The core gameplay is so rock solid, it would almost need no changes. So, the final verdict 18 years on? WipEout Pulse is more than a nostalgia trip. It's a genuine masterpiece of game design. It's a technical showcase that transcends its hardware, a content-rich package that respects your intelligence, and a sensory experience that delivers a focused, immersive escape from the modern world. It's the PSP's best racer and arguably the most perfectly realized WipEout ever made. It's a preserved piece of gaming magic that proves that true greatness isn't about having the most power, but about having the most vision. But what do you think? Was Pulse your peak WipEout experience? Or do you hold a torch for the raw challenge of the original, or the slick sheen of HD? Let's get a proper, respectful debate going in the comments below. I'd love to hear your take. Alright everyone, this is the Retro Gaming Boss signing out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.